I'm a very busy person, so apologies in advance for the Podcasters Show series 2 has taken a little bit of a hiatus, but during the holidays, that's just what happens, and it's okay. We're back here, King of Podcasts here with you. Thank you for joining me once again. One of the things that happened was that, it's always about the attracting and bringing on really good guests, the filtering process, things like that. And I think we have a really great guest we can bring on with us today, who, as like myself, has done a lot of work in podcasting, and his current podcast series, 680 episodes. Wow. So somebody definitely has a track record. We've talked to some of those that have been on here that have had that long track record doing podcasts. So my guest is best known as the Dr. Digital, a Chief Digital Officer at Smith Consulting, LLC. With over 27 years of experience, he also leads the Idea to Author coaching community. Background includes extensive work in education, from pre-K to higher education, experience in ed tech, recruitment, online course development, teaching. He's a podcaster, again, 680 episodes on digital marketing, technology, authors, and business innovation. Also co-hosts podcasts on topics like divorce, music, relationships, and intimacy. I'm here with the Dr. Digital, Dr. Mick Smith. Doctor, thanks for being on with us.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Nice to see you.
Same here. For myself, I know that when I started doing podcasting, now this is before I even got into producing and editing. We were just calling it audio archiving in 2005. August 2005 will be my 20th year in podcasting. And 2012 was when I started doing my own, because the hosting became affordable enough for me to go ahead and decide to make the switch. But one of those things was having some diversity in the content, because for some people, there's the part where, okay, if I'm going to do content, I want to be able to put everything onto one show or create multiple series. I just remember I tried to go and do a couple different pilots, figured out which show I'm going to start off with first, and then go on from there. And that's what I did. Well, with yourself, I noticed that was the same kind of direction that you did for yourself in being able to go ahead and cover a wide range of your podcast. And also because of the fact that if you're going to be someone that's going to talk about that, I mean, it's a matter of how much research you do, your expertise in it from your own perspective, or being able to just be a good interview that gets the right questions out of the right guests. Talk to me what it is about what you're doing right now to have that diversification of content, hosting a podcast, or the series that you host or co-host.
Yeah, I think it starts out with the Dr. Digital podcast, and that's where the 680 or so come in. And so that's why I've always said that's my main podcast. But then I've also found that there are some niches as well. So that's kind of the process you walk yourself through. So that's how some of the other podcasts came up. Excuse me. So where I started looking at some other things and been asked, frankly, because once I'd been around for a while, I had some people jump in there. So I had a good buddy of mine that said, I'm doing these things already on Music 101. And hey, I noticed you wrote a book on music. And so you must know something about music. How about co-hosting? Okay, great. So that's how Music 101 came about. And he had a couple other podcasts as well, love letters, and then about relationships. So we do those. That's 3 times a week. So when I'm saying 680 on the Dr. Digital podcast, well, I started accumulating the other ones that I've done now for several months, 3 a week. And then I had yet another podcast on the aftermath, the epidemic of custody, divorce, and healing that had about 70 episodes. So now I'm starting to think, it's like 700, 800 episodes. I've lost count. But I think what a podcaster can do is to start with primarily what they know and what they do. And I think where you started, that's what I did. I said, all right, I'm going to make some mistakes, right? And frankly,
yeah.
So this is what happens. And you start realizing that even when you record a few episodes, when you first get started, wow, that wasn't very good. I was, fumbling with it. And, so I think what I would always advise a podcaster to do, or a potential podcaster, is to bank about 10 episodes. And the reason I say about 10 is that you might look back and start saying, well, I've improved and I've gotten a little bit better. So you have to be able to take your expertise, no question about it. But then there are also some subjects that you may be able to find that would be of interest to other people. And that's why I've said it's kind of unfolded for me. I have one basic episode podcast, but then there are some specialties as well. And I've been fortunate enough to jump on those as well.
And most importantly, I will always say that in coaching and producing podcasts for others, a lot of clients we worked in over the years, hundreds. It's always about, you want to really get the first way to really start improving your craft is you got to force yourself to listen back. You need to catch what you're doing wrong. You need to realize all the stumbling, fumbling, stammering that you're doing on a regular basis. And, for some of those, we don't get to do that because for some of my clients, I have to go and cut everything out. So I clean them up beforehand. And, great for them. They don't even really take the advantage of approaching that. But then I have to go and come back to them as devil's advocate and say, listen, yeah, you sounded great right there, but this is what you really sounded like. And that's the part where you want that to be the first thing, I guess, in those first 10 podcasts, as you say. That would be one of the first things I would say that anybody needs to learn if they're going to get themselves polished and be able to go and do this. And also keep in mind, I came from a radio background. If you listen to people that are doing radio and you hear the ones that are not stumbling over and can pregnant pause and just realize, okay, you need to be able to just control what you're saying.
Sure.
Intonate, enunciate, everything like that. It's those things that you come across. So initially the Dr. Digital podcast, and I wasn't trying to go and look back about how far, when was the initial start of the series? How long ago was that?
That was, I would say, it's 12 years ago when I first started. So I started saying, yes, I probably wasn't into it as heavily as it got because I started realizing it's really good and I really want to do this. So I think I just tried it out, but it originally went back about 12 years and then it got more serious in the last few years. And I agree with your point, actually, with broadcasting. That's what got my interest in podcasting in the first place, because way back when, in a decade-long time ago, I was in broadcasting. So I said, podcasting is very similar to broadcasting, and microphone and an audience, and you're trying to build up an audience.
Well, and the thing was, at that point, we were already starting to get that first mainstream appeal to podcasting because Serial had just come out, the NPR series, and that really just got people to kind of like into the idea of just getting into it as a hobby until we got to where we are today. But at the time of digital marketing, let's go ahead and put that first and front and forward, because we still have an existing podcast network I still operate called WMR.FM, formerly WebmasterRadio.fm. So very much entrenched in digital marketing. So we had the folks from Bruce Clay Incorporated, the man who coined the term search engine optimization. We did shows on affiliate marketing. We were doing some great shows on that. James Martell, God rest his soul, passing away, but did a great show called Affiliate Buzz with us for a long time. SEO 101, SEO Rockstars. We were embedded in the whole thing where everybody was on with us. We also had Danny Sullivan, Daily Search Cast. Any of these things might ring a bell. But for us, I know at the time, Google was going through so many different updates. We had Panda, we had Penguin, so many things that were changing and just going at the speed of light right then and there. And of course, the advent of social media really getting a stranglehold on search results, because social media wanted to also be a search engine. And that's what everybody tried to go and do with Twitter, Facebook, and the like. And now the same thing goes with the other social media outlets like it's here, TikTok or LinkedIn, and just they're all kind of embedding in that way. But talking about now in those 12 years about staying on top of the changes in digital marketing, and also the fact that mobile has become so important. Mobile started right then and there at the same time. Like that's a real heavy time to go and jump in with a new podcast, and what you've seen through those last 13 or so years. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that's certainly the case. And oddly enough, I did concentrate on digital marketing at the very beginning too. I had some good contacts in that field. And I said, well, I could see audio in general and podcasting specifically to be a growing area. So I said, if you have digital marketers, this is the area to go into. So I was fortunate enough, I had about 12 or 15 or so experts. So that was how I started getting more serious about it after doing the initial foray that, yes, I want to be a podcaster, but I don't know exactly where my direction goes. And then I had contact with all these great digital marketers. And I said, well, I'm the person with the podcasting, and now this is another area for them to get into. So as it kind of evolved, I was also watching the trends. I was also watching what else was happening. So you get the social media, you get the mobile, you start getting the introduction of YouTube. So now you go back and questions on saying, is it visual or just audio? Do it's both, a combination? So all of those things, I think trying to stay on top of the trends makes it both an interesting and engaging and dynamic field, which is why I always say everybody should be podcasting or listening to podcasts, because it is a really dynamic field.
Now, did you ever notice the correlation? I've noticed this in retrospect now, that prior to 2012, 2013, we had a lot of the big major super conferences. I remember going to events like Search Engine Strategies, or going to Affiliate Summit, or going to Ad Tech, or those kind of areas where these were these big super conferences, 5,000, 10,000 folks. We're going to New York, we're going to the Midtown Manhattan Hilton, or Marriott in Times Square, all Javits, all these big places, or going to Vegas, or going to California, whatever it was, San Jose, California, all the time we always had events there. And then we started getting more into the boutique type of shows. Search Marketing Expo being one of those, coming in as a disruptor into the space. And then we had a lot of others that would come in, small, compact. So the community did not convene together. I mean, going back to even like PubCon would be kind of one of those congregating kind of areas of digital marketers, but that has changed. And I think that's one of the things that, because those conferences went away, that interaction we had, we needed to have something. And that was always the pitch for other digital marketers to go and do podcasting with us, is that we want to give you a platform that you can continue to go ahead and communicate with all the people you would talk to on the trade show floor, or during a session at a conference. We want you to go and stay engaged with them. So that's what you had to go and do. Do you notice that as well? And was that something that you kind of noticed, why the podcasting idea was something that was the right thing to approach at the time?
Yeah, and I think you head on something there, which ties into the whole idea of the pandemic. I think where you start saying, let's not have to go somewhere. And then there was a time where we couldn't go anywhere. So what happens is people start listening, and they start listening more because they're at home, or they're not necessarily going to conventions. I mean, you think about the entertainment industry, conventions, cruises. I mean, it almost killed some of those industries. So what you could do is you could have the advantage of still meeting and still talking with a lot of people, but you just do it remotely. And I think one of the things that came out of the pandemic was the fact that you can just listen and still make the connections and still network and still a lot of the things that you would have done, except you're not doing it physically. Same thing with work. It's changed the nature of work. A lot more remote workers now.
Now, beyond the Dr. Digital, and this is something that's kind of interesting out there, where you delve not just into digital marketing, but you also, in your podcasting, where you delve into music, love, and sex through podcasting. One of those areas I think about too is that when you look at what you've done in digital marketing, we also know that when people want to go ahead and know that, okay, well, maybe SEO or affiliate marketing are not areas we can go really be able to go make, big consultancy fees like we used to in the past, get the several $100s per hour fee, because also corporatization, there's in-house outfits now in place. And always notice that, it was always one thing where this was always the kind of like the inside thing. A lot of those search engine companies, or all those digital marketers, they made their money off of porn, pills, and casinos prior to search marketing really becoming really popular as it was. And then we go into other fringe areas. So now we have, in my area, I know we expanded it to, 10 years ago to cannabis. And now we're kind of expanding into plant medicine, like psychedelics and biohacking and various ventures like that. And there's other people that can go into crypto. Like, there's all these other fringe areas to cover. So is that something that you look at, where the spectrum of what you can talk about, how you kind of branch yourself out? Because there is a lot of, that's a wide range right there, what you talk about. And the same thing goes in business for some people, where their business goes.
Yeah, I think what happens is you find the niche. So anybody who's in podcasting, you would say, here are some things that you can do. You come out for your expertise. So you sort of balance the general interest. So yes, I never really thought I'd be on a relationship show, because I don't know if I'm an expert on it, but I can think about it, and I can share my experiences, and I can talk about it. I think what you try to do is you find both a niche in some ways, or also you'll have a broad enough audience that people are interested. And these are things and subjects that clearly people are interested in. So if you're like music, then you're going to check in the Music 101. I have certain areas that I know about. So general interest. However, I don't know about all kinds of music at all times. And so contemporary music kind of goes over my head. I'll be honest with it. So person is interested in the areas of music that I do know. I think they would check it out. And also, I think it helps in terms of all podcasting. It's information. The flow of information is just incredible. So when you think about these are revolutions that took place in the past with Gutenberg, all of a sudden people have access to a lot more data. And I see both the internet has done that. I think both podcasting has done that. It's revolutionized the access to information. How many people start saying when they look at education, they say, well, I learn just as much on YouTube as I do in some formal institutional setting. Well, not surprisingly, because there are so many experts there and there is so much good information and so much good data out there that people gravitate to it. So when you find your interest, there's other people out there that want to know about that particular subject.
So when you decided to diversify out and you had offers from other podcasters, hey, come on and be a co-host of my program. One of the things I know for me was that I was doing a series in 2019, my third series. I called it When I'm Not Podcasting, made it more or less of the umbrella series just to talk about various issues. So some of the areas where I had to go and work on the working area in cannabis that I wanted to reach to a mainstream audience. Then there was an area, those were about society, dating, culture, relationships. And there were other areas I looked at as well that I thought I could, attest to. And then I would go ahead and evaluate what those podcasts did, how they performed. And I noticed the ones about the dating, culture, sex, all that. And I was kind of attached because I did some work as we had a podcast network that was towards the tail end of the adult industry when it wasn't so highly regulated and the money was still going on. People could still monetize in the area, but now, of course, it's changed. The thing was, I found out that content was something that I could resonate with because when I talked about those particular episodes, they did well. So I decided, okay, I'm going to just convert that show into a new series and focus on that. It's called Depaved and Debaucherous. It's done pretty well. Like on YouTube, I get pretty good numbers overall, and it's better than I thought it was going to be, just hitting on the right subjects. But that was the part where I found a way to make it where it was my own. And the content was something I do a lot of research on because, it's funny, like I do a lot of reading. I'll look at articles regular basis, wherever I'm going to go find it, from X or the Google News feed, all these places I'm going through like this algorithm of just kind of like, okay, I'm going to filter through what I want to go and find that is interesting to me. And maybe these topics are things I don't get to talk about with us to anyone else. Tell me about that part, about what you get to talk about outside of digital marketing, the expertise you get from it, how you're getting that expertise, how much of it is attached to you, and really, why do you feel like that's something that you have enough people that you could talk about this, and that's why if you don't, you channel it here to these shows.
Yeah, and I think you can give an example. So one of them that I said was the aftermath, the epidemic of divorce, custody, and healing. So that was a surprise. So I came across a person that from a third person that said, we first got interviewed on her podcast, and they said, you know what, you guys ought to collaborate. And said, yes, because we both had our own experiences and you could bounce off of one another. It was almost like the perfect setting because we had a male, female perspective, mother, then you have a male father perspective. Both of us had experienced something separately. However, you could get the male, female perspective, mother, father perspective. And then sure enough, we also came across the leading experts in the field, which was really fortunate. So through the series of 60 or 70 episodes that we did on that, for example, we talked to the top people, absolutely top people in the United States and also in the UK. And surprisingly, that turned out to be a top 5% global podcast, which surprised us because we weren't really thinking about that. But what you find is that this is a niche, and that's often the case of people who are really seeking information. They wouldn't necessarily have access to the top experts. And sure enough, that thing kind of took off like wildfire. So you find these subjects or these topics, and you find your audience because you're providing good information and good value. So a couple of things I would always say, podcasting, you have to always produce value, and you also have to be authentic. And with a serious subject like this that hit people personally, like myself and my co-host, it was definitely authentic. It was from the heart, and it also provided value. So in a podcast, I think those are some two key elements that you have to have.
So I'm looking through some of the episodes that you had done on that, and I can imagine there is a lot to cover in that, from what you talk about when it came to the legal side, counseling, the trauma that comes after this. Like that's it really, I mean, you covered a lot of ground on that. And was any of that to do with just the expertise of maybe what you've done in terms of any counseling at all? Like, what was it that made you a good contributor to co-host that podcast? What were some of the things that you were able to go and offer?
I think one of the things, I wrote a novel on burning America in the best interests of the children, and it was about my experience. And that's how we connected in the first place with my co-host from third person, because they actually had a good story, and a good story is something which is very compelling. I also apply this to podcasting in general when I'm interviewing people. And here's how I would say it. There's this notion of in media res, which when you're writing a novel or writing something creative, it's in the middle of. So when some people are saying, I'm going to write this book, and it kind of goes on, a lot of background, is going to know what you really want to do is you do this technique, which is called in media res, in the middle of something, and usually something traumatic, because if you don't do that, start there, then nobody's interested. So likewise, I've applied this to my interviews, and I try to say for a person, tell me about your background, usually something that's most interesting, most startling, most dramatic thing, and that's the hook. So once you get people hooked at the very beginning, then they will also continue listening because they can see that there's value in that particular episode. So my personal expertise, I guess, was that I had a good story. And so the other person had a good story. And from there, we were just very fortunate because we started talking to the leading experts in the field, provided that value for the audience. And then at the same time, what you have is this wide range of things, just like you mentioned. Okay, there's legal, there's psychological, there's traumatic things that are going on. How do you counsel people? How do you help people? How do you help your children? At what age can you help your children? And what do you do at the different ages that children are if they are going through this process? So there is a lot there. And with that much of content that could be produced, turns out what we were doing is had that value for people and listeners.
So let's go and focus into the reason you were able to call yourself the Doctor of Digital. So in the program itself, the podcast, you start off and you make mention of, and it's, I'm taking from a story from Canvas Rebel, that they did a profile on you. You talk about in 1994, you jumped on early adopting the internet. You built distance learning programs that were very profitable, and you did consulting. And then you started advocating for digital transformation and group companies in education, nonprofit, and the internet, and for the internet startup fields. Now, from the area of digital marketing, give me the expertise you were able to get from that respect, because 94, that's when SEO really started becoming, not having become a term yet, but people were starting to pay attention right around that time. So if there's enough people that I have in the space where, I'm my boss over at the Webmaster Radio and Cannabis Radio, his name is SE Guru. You might remember the name in the mid 90s. That's what his name comes from. And he's what we call like an OG SEO, one of those first engineering pioneers in the field. And there's plenty of others we know in the same place. If I gave names like, Web Gorilla or Baked Jake or Oil Man, and people like that, the handles were all everybody knew, people buy. And what you had to go and do through coding to get yourself notice the search results and helping others to do the same thing on Google or, maybe it was Netscape or whatever there was back in the day, or Yahoo, that was what everybody was really paying attention to. So talk to me about your expertise as an early adopter in digital.
Yeah, and I think that's where the name came from. So people have asked me, like, how did you come up with the Doctor of Digital and why? Well, because there's a digital transformation that's taking place. In my particular setting, I was an educator, and I've been for a long time. So I say now, at this point, I'm a recovering academic because I was in academia for a long time. Mm-hmm. In 1994, I noticed that after the 1980s and all the stumbling through computers and how inefficient they were and how they didn't work. So I now apologize, of course, to all IT computer people, because the 80s didn't seem like computers were going to go anywhere. But by 94, it did, with those things that you're mentioning, say Netscape, for example. And what I saw is that this could be applied to education. And certainly it has more extensively since then. But if you started with distance learning, which I did at the time, I said, okay, we can be very efficient with this. If we digitize all of our content, we're able to produce much more revenue with not producing more and more content all the time because now it's archived. Now we can allow access for the students. And from there, it really built out. So I then in 1998, I went to Texas A&M and I got a certificate in distance learning administration because I realized that, well, this is opening up a whole consulting field. If people are starting to go into colleges and universities and then other institutions are going to offer distance learning, there's going to be a need for it. So that's what I really saw. And from there, of course, then you start getting the LMSs, learning management systems, some of which are still around, some that have fallen by the wayside. But what it means is that digitizing education was really a new concept in the 90s, and then about 2000 and then 2000 subsequently, it starts to become more and more common. In fact, one of the things I noticed since the background in education, there were what I called no-name institutions, right? They weren't the big Ivy schools, they weren't the leading lights, but all of a sudden you find some colleges or universities, because they embrace distance learning and online education so much, they suddenly became players. They suddenly became much more popular, much more profitable because they saw the trend. And that's the digitizing revolution that I saw.
Now, in the world of digital now today, and before the term of artificial intelligence became such a popular term these days, we were talking about machine learning and language learning models. So now we're in this place where we are going into where it's now being embedded even in our podcasting prowess today. I know I use AI for a lot of things right now just to go and generate titles, descriptions, and whatnot. And there's a lot of affordability, and to be able to go and just create your own content with the right quality of equipment, everything like that's come in. Technology has made it much easier to go and do this. Plus your content obviously has gone through the evolution of technology as well. What do you think about where we are in the direction now where if we leave it up to the machines now to kind of take care of these kind of things?
Well, I think it's both exciting and also sort of uncharted territory, which makes it even more exciting, right? Because I can make an analogy to the internet in general. This is what I describe AI. AI is the internet on steroids. That's how I see it. Because just like when the internet came in and you had access to all kinds of information remotely, now what AI has done is it's really made that whole process much faster. So when I need information, now I can get it quicker, better, faster. And also those tools, I say it's also an analogy like a horse race, because I use about 6 AI tools that I can see, because the events are going so quickly that everyone is competing with everyone else, which is really awesome, which means they're going to improve, they're going to get better and faster. So one of the things you notice that they do hallucinate, because what they are trying to do is to give you an answer, but you notice that there are things that will pop in. So I'll give you an example with music. So I'm going to ask for, give me a tune for Stevie Wonder from the 1970s, and it'll give me one in the 1960s. And I go, no, you made a mistake. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm really arrogant, but some things I know better than the AI. They make mistakes and they hallucinate. But I think those are one of the fields that people are going to improve and improve very quickly. So if you think about AI as opposed to content, that is graphics in terms of written material, in terms of accuracy, all of these things are coming, and exactly where it's going, I don't know, but I don't think anybody can predict, but it's going to be very exciting. It's going to be much quicker, much faster, and it replaces a lot of the boring, I would say, right? So if I had to come up with content, I'd have to think about things for a day or so and mull it over, what I call percolate in my head. I got to think about things. But with the AI and machine learning tools that can be adapted and personalized, you can get that information much quicker, much faster. And it's a good basis or foundation upon which you can reflect on. So there are some tools, brainstorming tools, and also ideas, content, episodes, summaries. All of those things are incoming, and I think they're just going to get much better as time goes on. It won't be very long.
Yeah. Right now with AI, I know that I can get quite a bit of work done, but I can't do it with one system at a time. I have to use multiple. So I will switch between ChatGPT and Google Gemini for anything I gotta go and do. With Google Gemini, I have a premium program because I have the Google One subscription that includes it. So I try to do more with that, but Google Gemini has its limitations. And I know they're still trying to get it in process and work. The other thing too is that for anyone using AI, it's about the input. It's whatever you're going to inject of yourself that has to be brought in, and you have to get used to the fact that, okay, treat it like an employee. Give all the information you're going to need to give. Don't assume that it's going to know everything, and continue to just keep tweaking it. Go back. Okay, here, we do like this, do it like this. And I'm not going to expect the learning model to go ahead and learn itself. I don't even expect that. I'm just going to expect, okay, this is almost going to be a novice to like a barely above novice, or at least we'll be good at data entry. We'll be good at, taking the information that's already been gathered. Fine. Archivist, all that kind of thing. But it's not going to think for itself. You're going to have to give as much input as possible to make sure you get the most out of it. And that's what I've learned for myself. Like, I'll put in and just spit out a whole lot of that I need to go and get into the system to get it done right. And, sometimes it'll even do things where, if you want to try to put a argument, counter argument, it won't really do that, because I know in the dating society culture things, if I try to make it say something in Gemini that it's going to be there, it's not the popular opinion, it won't even allow it to go and generate, because there's just certain things that what's being built into those particular models they don't want to go and do. So you have to go with multiple models to be able to go and operate well and have the right input and continue to tweak. It's still going to be a short amount of time to do it that route than trying to go and organically generate yourself and then just continue to proofread, rewrite, revisit, and all that. I think there's a common ground in all that still does work for time management and still allows you to go ahead and have someone else thinking for you, helping out in that process.
If you make a comparison to a staff person or a VA, so you have a virtual assistant, and the virtual assistant is very quick, very efficient, and really terrific at what they do, but they need direction. So AI is something like that. If you treat it like a staff person, they need direction. And there's where the prompt comes in, because I think that's a really valid point. When you're working with AI, depending on what you put in, and it's the old thing, it goes back to what programmers said and coders when I first started working with them. They said garbage in, garbage out. It's something like that. So if you give it the correct prompt, and if you are very specific, it often will improve the answer that you're getting. So AI in machine learning is taking all the stuff that's out there. That's why it will make mistakes and it hallucinates. There's a lot of mistakes out there. There's a lot of things that are incorrect. And what a machine learning is doing is taking all of that in. It doesn't mean it gets the best material, doesn't mean it gets the worst material, but it's somewhere in the middle. But what we do as human beings is we take that as a basic starting point and a foundation, and then what we do is we'll apply our human thinking to improve all the data that's out there and all that stuff that's out there. So one of the things that AI will probably get better at is what you mentioned. It will be personalized. The more I train it, the more it's personalized to what I need, the more and more accurate and better answers that I'm going to get.
All right. So I got to ask about one of the other podcasts that you do right now, Love Letters. That's what Daniel Lucas, you co-host with him. And, it's part of what you come into and what you're talking about. I don't know about Daniel and what his background is, but I mean, is it two older, I guess more adult gentlemen talking about love, talking about various areas where you bring up OnlyFans, you bring up, do hot girls settle? When it comes to age of abandonment, all these different psychological, emotional, cultural topics, talking about where you're doing that show pretty regularly right now. And it's one of those things where you are able to offer the expertise that you give. And I know for me, I'm always trying to attract a younger audience. So tell me what you do. What's the target audience you're going for? And what kind of response do you get? And what kind of content do you feel like you need to bring to the table that's going to attract that audience?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that have been quite bigger than you might think, or I would found, I don't know why anybody would be interested in what I particularly have to say, but it is a unique perspective. And when we start going over the data and we do the analytics with Daniel, to start seeing, how many countries are we in? We're in 50 countries and 80 countries. So everyone, we're saying the goal is 100 countries. So actually it's a global audience. So oddly enough, there are people all over the world listening. So Love Letters to me is, yes, I'm a cultural critic in some way, right? So I'm a historian by training. That was actually my expertise, but that also spills over into I'm thinking about culture. And these are cultural issues, But of course, they hit the heart. There are, things that are really personal to people, and love is very personal, right? So culturally, these are the things that are going on. I see them, I observe them, I'm commenting on them. And hopefully, based on the questions and the responses we're getting, there are those people who are listening. And surprisingly enough, it's a global audience. So it means that probably people are very interested in this and want to know more. I just have a focus because I am an American and I do have some religious affiliations and beliefs. And I think that's what provides the cultural critique that I think has that unique perspective, because I'm a godly person. In some ways, I would say righteous person, and I'm doing the best that I can to provide guidance, mostly for younger people, but for some of us older folks as well.
I know when I do the program of my own, there's been parts where the OnlyFans epidemic about that. And now, I can almost understand where there are certain, habits and certain things that people like going to do now that, or I'm not going to understand anymore because, being older. And I remember, 80s and 90s where people were very sexually active, and there was just a certain way of handling things and what people like to go and do, what the debaucherous things they might like to do. And so the way has changed so much, because now it's not even where it's like, okay, you want to do something like that? You want to do something that's like that, crazed and very out there? It would be in person. But now all that's being hidden behind, computers, but online. That all that kind of behavior is more online than it was ever before. Unless there's somebody that's doing the content in person and then putting it online for everyone to go in and watch. There's this whole, the industry now, a way it's being done. I mean, it's like where porn was a certain way. Okay, you had actors, actresses, a whole setup. Everything was being watched. People could watch it in theaters, whatever it was. Now it's all being held behind online. And I don't think people understand the risk they take into putting themselves into that kind of environment and what it means to them. Because there's so many people now that can be easily persuaded and adapted to this environment, because so many people have looked at the online environment and they take it so much to heart, like it really means something to them. It's so realistic. But we know older, we see it's not. We see there's a difference between reality outside the real world and what there is online.
Yeah, and in some ways, there's an advantage, because even though I'm the doctor of digital, I lived in a pre-digital age, right? So what it was like to not have all of these things. And that's why, as much as I enjoy technology and as much as I talk about it and as much as I use it, I'm not a slave to it. So if you notice, the younger people, they walk around and I said they're all going to have the bent neck syndrome because they're always bending over, looking over their phones, which I don't do because I can detach from it. I remember an age when we didn't have all these things. So as much as I use it, that's where the cultural critic comes in. How about a simpler age? How about a less is more kind of age? Because when we didn't have those things, I would argue that we were much more creative in some ways because we had to come up with entertainment ourselves. We had to create ourselves and not necessarily look for digital entertainment and also that sort of addictive digital entertainment because we had to do things ourselves. In a previous generation, even further back older than me, that's why people would say, learn musical instruments. So they would learn the violin, the piano. They would have to entertain themselves, and it was a simpler age. So my point here is that for a lot of younger people, not knowing any of those things, I think the perspective of a more mature, in some ways, I'm going to say wise or a little bit of wisdom, that you can also detach from these things. So when you brought up, say, OnlyFans, which are really interesting, right? So people can then expose themselves and they're going to make a whole lot of dollars and a whole lot of money, which some few people have. Well, the surprising statistic you come up with is the average person on OnlyFans makes $180 a month, So look, if you think you're going to get rich, just like it was back in the gold rush days, that's probably not going to happen. So
now in the last 4 months, we have several particular models that have decided to go to the route of doing what, some of those adult stars did back in the day where, okay, we're going to have sex with thousands of men at a time. Like now we're getting to that point where this is the part where okay, we're going to get out of control here. Who is going to try to follow along and try to go ahead and supersede what they're doing, the behavior that's being accepted? There's not a lot of outcry to it. And if there is, there's the common ground of people that might be a little bit more sanctimonious or hypocritical themselves, but I talk about it, but it's also the part because I'm just trying to say, listen, I'm not going to stop anybody from, curbing their behavior. People are going to do what they're going to do. I'm kind of just, the spectator here watching what's being done. But there has to be a point where, okay, somebody has to be the adult in the room and say, listen, for those young people that are coming into this and they're saying, oh, they're kind of starting to idolize who these women are, stop. Because there's that, and there's all different places we watch in terms of what we watch on TV, movies, what's streaming right now. It used to be where, sexual content was like front and center. When we watched a lot of movies, a lot of sex scenes, a lot of things like that. But then there's this whole thing of taking all that out of our content because you don't see so much of it anymore because it has to be some kind of quota. It has to be the way all these different things need to be covered. So the way we might have been sexualized in the 90s and 2000s, that's kind of gone. But now it's just being hidden. And it's like, I don't want it to be hidden. I want it to still be in the front because I want people to feel shame for it. If they're going to do it, okay, you're going to feel shame for it, but at least you're going to do it and you're going to admit that you're doing it. It's not going to be hiding behind some computer screen and not being able to go and thinking you're not going to get any consequences, or you're not going to be taking the risk and you're going to realize the risk is going to hurt you. Because I don't think anybody realizes consequences anymore. So that's why they think they can go and do it without any retribution whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think this is where maybe there's a unique perspective or a little bit better. It's a caution because I agree with the statement. I mean, look, people are going to do what they're going to do. I have no right to tell anybody else what they should do. I don't want people telling me what I should do, but there's some caution. I do think you could say some guidelines. So, is this the best behavior? And unfortunately, younger people, if this is what they grow up with, they are going to think it's normal. Just like I give this story, I grew up in New Jersey around oil refineries, right? So I thought the whole world had oil refineries. And you get a bit older and you realize, well, no, this is not normal. It's just happened to be the way that I grew up and where I grew up. So for younger people, they should know that certain behaviors are probably not the best thing to do, that's not the best to engage in. So a perspective is like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this as you get older? So let's say you're a younger person and you expose yourself in a certain way. Are you ever going to be able to live with that for the rest of your life? And that means as you get older and you start thinking, I'm going to develop a relationship, I'm going to have children. I mean, is this a content that you want your children to see? I mean, there are things that are sort of common sense. I mean, be an adult in the room, just say, this is just something to consider, just something to think about. So rather than seeing the things that are here now as normal, maybe you can say there's alternatives. And I would always say it comes down to individual choice. What do you think is the best choice for you to be doing and for you to be engaging in at this moment?
Dr. Nick Smith, really appreciate you coming on and talking about all this. Let's really quickly go into your content. So again, initial show is the Dr. Digital. You can find that, of course, all major podcast platforms. And you're still doing shows as today. Love Letters we talked about as well. Also a current show you're co-hosting. And among that's so much ground you're covering right there. So what's the best possible place? I know there's a couple of different ways people can find you. I noticed that the website for the book, burning-america.com, burning-america.com. But is there any other websites or any other places that people can go ahead and follow along with you so they can go and get to your content?
Yeah, I think probably the best place is the Idea to Author Coach on Facebook. And the reason I use Facebook is that most people are there. It's ubiquitous. And I was never a big user of it, but I found there's so many people there. And a lot of my activities can be found there as well. So the Idea to Author Coach on Facebook, it's primarily for a person who wants to express themselves. They want to write a book or they want to sell more books. I can help them do that. That's where the recovering academic part of me comes in. Everything you know about academia, publisher perish. So having known that field and knowing that, I've got some other projects along those ways. So I'll keep people updated. If you want to write, you want to sell books, let me know and keep tabs on all my other activities.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Dr. Nick Smith, the Dr. Digital. Thank you for being with us here on Podcaster Trail. Really appreciate you taking time out. Listeners, thank you for listening in. We'll talk to you next time.